but Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, 23 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. down here in Kampala, Uganda, where we do come to you live to bring you the latest of the discussion from the world of football. And thank you to every single one of you that was part of our discussion last night. Not very many people, but the few that were there stayed for the length of time. We had a very, very fruitful discussion coming on to close an hour. We did discuss, some a recap of the events from the Uganda Premier League. We talked about whether Manchester United are back, what's gone wrong for Liverpool, and things like that. So I thought this morning we should have another discussion, and our topic will be a question. It's a question, a topical question where we do ask: could StarTimes Uganda drag FUFA to court over the new Uganda Premier League format? That will formulate part of our debate. But I wish to say thank you so much to all our new community members. Those that have recently joined the forum, those that have recently subscribed. For those of you that have recently watched our content, I will do not take your time for granted. Thank you so much for dedicating us your time and valuable resources to watch whatever it is we have to give you. Anyways, allow me have our audios tested. Make sure everything does check out before we even go any further in as far as this morning's broadcast is concerned. Special greetings or shout outs to you, Mr. Kasuku Kuku Wazabanga. It's a pleasure to know that you've recovered at least fairly well from your recent illness. And I hope we can sort of get a moment to sit down and have a discussion. Hi Pedri, how are you doing? Good to have you this beautiful morning. I don't know why some messages I'm being told are being hidden. So, but it's a pleasure to have you around. How are you? How is your morning? How is Spain on this beautiful Tuesday morning? Anything new? Are you enjoying the international break, or are you looking forward to any particular games, or it's as boring to you as many of our, our football followers who tend to have a sort of a love and hate relationship with the international break, because it's always dependent on who is in action and when they are in action, if they are to follow the events of their respective national teams. So it's that kind of relationship that some people tend to have with international breaks. You say, good, the international break is the worst. I hate. I think if LFC were to be here, I think he wouldn't disagree much to say that he equally doesn't have a fancy or have a particular liking to the international break. But I particularly understand, because for most fans, they feel it creates this bit of disruption for their favorite football leagues. The teams that they do follow up. And then, of course, the other very, very big issue is that sometimes players pick up injuries during the international break, which, people do not really like. Pedri asked, what do you think of the news that Villarreal Barcelona will be played in the USA? Personally, I hate this awful decision. Now, from a marketing perspective, I'd say it's a good decision from a marketing perspective, because I know that the Spanish La Liga's intention in all this is to try and market the Spanish La Liga and endear it to more, our fans from the USA. We know how the size of the US economy. We know how that money from, the likes of Prime have done for the Premier League in terms of broadcast revenue and things like that. So, I meant Amazon Prime. So, and all the other broadcasters from within the US market and things like that. So, I want to believe that's the kind of direction or school of thought within which La Liga takes this kind of match over the USA. But from the local fans' perspective, It's a bit of a disadvantage. It's a bit of a disservice because we know that one, teams love to play their home games at home because of the kind of advantages that they get to have with that. Beyond the results that do actually happen on the pitch, in terms of whether you're going to beat up against Barcelona or Villarreal is going to lose, that notwithstanding, you look at it and think to yourself and say, there's money involved. And that money is that if I have a 50,000 seater stadium, maybe 5,000 the away fans and 45,000 the home fans. So you taking the game to the USA, you would have robbed them of that. While the economies within which these games are played, particularly the Spanish economy or the European market, as I would want to call it, is a very capable economy in terms of in the financial sense of it, that it has a large group of people within the middle income class. You want to think that not many still can afford to, buy an air ticket and then fly out to the USA and also buy a match ticket and get to watch, their team play the way it's commonly done when you have European or Champions League football, because in some cases the cost of transportation from one country to another is relatively cheaper or affordable, or the movement is easier, whereas the USA is a bit distant away in that sort of regard. So logistically, not every fan can afford it. You may find that maybe the only cohort of fans that may be able to afford it, that's if they even have the time, that much time, traveling considered, to go watch the game and come back, would be the season ticket holders. But again, it's still a little too much to ask of them. You say Villarreal fans who are probably looking forward to this game, it's a disgrace. Yes, I mean, even if it were Barcelona fans and they were the ones to be the home team, they would be looking forward to that kind of fixture. We recently saw Real Madrid play Villarreal over the weekend and beat them by 3-1. I'm sure Real Madrid fans were looking forward to that kind of fixture because in recent times, particularly this season, Villarreal have had a good start to their campaign. It's been, to say the least, it's been an okay thing, Now you have to work up to 2 a.m. Now you have to wake up at 2 a.m. Yes, and particularly, I was coming to that's also the other conundrum for which our fans will find themselves in when it comes to games being played over the United States. It's a totally different time zone compared to perhaps the majority of Europe. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Particularly, my example here is that it's 9:30 a.m. and in the UK it's 7:30 a.m. Now that's a disparity of 2 hours, and between you and I, doing this with you guys, I've had sort of a relatively better experience knowing that I'm only 2 hours ahead, and if my calendar is managed in a certain schedule, I get to have you guys on the forum and we'll get to discuss some of these matters. Now, when you compare it to the US markets, you remember when we were watching the FIFA Club World Cup, and I constantly said that for games that were kicking off at 1 a.m., for games that kicked off at 4 a.m., I would struggle to watch them. If I was able to catch the game that kicked off at 1 a.m., I couldn't catch the game that kicked off at 4 a.m. because for them, then that's their daytime. Whereas I don't want to say for the rest of the world, it's a night time, but I understand your concern to say that imagine even watching the game on TV, somebody has to wake up in the middle of the night. So that means probably if you're a school-going person, perhaps like Pedri or LFC, if you were to be here, would say, I need to go to bed by 9 and then have maybe 5 good hours of sleep or 4 hours, and then wake up to watch my game. And then that's 2 hours. That means by the time the game ends, it's about what? 4 a.m. Then you go back to sleep for an extra hour or two, or do you then just, it's time to kick in your morning routine? You would want to feel for people who work in shifts, because Villarreal are in third place on that La Liga standing table with 16 points in third place. Of course, only 3 points behind the second place Barcelona, and 5 points behind the leaders Real Madrid. So on paper, it's a very, very good game, but I understand the complexities that come with that sort of a situation that you've created. In any case, I think possibly during the course of last week, we did not discuss on this forum, but I was in a certain forum where we were looking at the timelines for kickoff of games, and the kickoff of these games that will be at the World Cup 2026, and they are trying to extend the hours from. You remember during the FIFA Club World Cup again, we had some games kicking off at 2 p.m. At 8 p.m. in the night, and then at 11 p.m., sometimes 10 p.m., and things like that. Now, the proposals or the suggestions is to push those games that were kicking off at 8 p.m., at 10 or 11 p.m., further down into 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. and those kinds of hours, 2 a.m. So you can see from the onset the kind of difficulty it will create for the larger spectrum of the footballing world when it comes to following events from the FIFA World Cup that will be played over there in the United States of America. So it's not that simple. Like I said, from a marketing perspective, I understand where La Liga coming from, but to the local fan, to the person, to the season ticket holder, to a person that is accustomed to watching their team week out, we know that with these developed countries where public transportation is not a major issue, where maybe gasoline or petrol or diesel, as we prefer to call it this side, is affordable, people get to drive to games. People get to catch the train from distant cities and go watch games. That's a very, very possible thing. So every time you're going to have a Spanish La Liga game played over there in the United States, it's always going to raise questions or concerns of how many fans domestically from within the Spanish La Liga are able to make a trip and go follow their team. It's not like it's pre-season or summer, where maybe some people are having the summer break and then maybe they've saved up some resources to go on a vacation that are going over to watch their team play in the USA will double as a vacation of its own. So, yeah, unfortunately, it's the sort of decision that the minders of La Liga have decided to take in terms of wanting to market the league. It's always going to be a contentious decision or debate amongst La Liga fans because, and I do not know what the sentiments are. I wish you had given us the overall sentiments within Villarreal fans or within Barcelona fans, because I want to believe even for the Barcelona fans, if you have to make a trip to go and watch your away game against Villarreal, within Spain, it's much simpler as compared to traveling to the United States. So maybe you can do us the absolute honor and favor and let us know what the overall sentiments and then sort of media publicity or narrative is being driven around when it comes to that kind of decision and fixture. I know for games like, let's say, the Supercopa Hispana, that kind of game, I sort of understand if you take it away. And I think the last edition, was it played in Saudi Arabia? I stand to be corrected if that's not the case, but I know it wasn't played within Spain. But so if it's maybe a Copa del Rey final, I would sort of understand, not that it would still not disadvantage domestic fans, it still would, but that's a cup competition. So when it comes to the entirety of the league, that's totally different. That's a very are different. I can imagine if you are perhaps, I'll give the context of Uganda. Imagine, let's say, a game between Sports Club Villa and KCCA, arguably the most successful domestic teams in as far as the Uganda Premier League is concerned, were to have their match played in Rwanda or in Kenya. We know that not many fans will be able to make the trip as much as they would have loved to watch those two teams play, for economic reasons or for financial reasons. So, yeah, I sort of understand that. But thank you so much for bringing that sort of a debate to the to be part of our topic this morning, or to be part of our discussion this morning. Thank you. I always appreciate when your submissions help us expound on our debate and our talking points when it comes to everything for on this forum. So thank you so much, Pedro, for that. Then let's go to the day's question. The elephant in the room. Could StarTimes Uganda sue or drag FUFA, that's the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, to court over the new Premier League format? Now, the new Uganda Premier League format is something that I have deliberated on. It's something that I have discussed on this forum before, and I want to repeat the formalities of what it is or what it entails. But just know it's a three kind of a league first format. It's different from the round robin as we've come to know of it. So, but now we do have a StarTimes Uganda as the naming rights and broadcast rights sponsor of the StarTimes Uganda Premier League, of the Uganda Premier League. That's why it's called the StarTimes Uganda Premier League. And their contract is a 10-year contract, which has run, I think, for the course of 7 years so far, and this would be the 8th year. And that means it's entering into, or has entered into, the third last year of that contract. Now, for the contract in its entirety was worth a whopping $10-point-something million. This was signed back, I think, in 2018. So you look at it all, and because in this hullabaloo between the federation, the fans, the clubs that are involved, we know that clubs have been largely silent for partly because of the reasons that we did discuss, I think, yesterday in the morning broadcast, that many of our clubs within the top flight are backed by political institutions or government institutions who have political agendas, or they use these teams as PR machines, as opposed to entirely being run as football clubs that are meant to be in business, whose administration is independent of whatever the politics may go on within their respective entities. For example, the Kampala Capital City Authority that runs Kampala Capital City Authority Football Club, a Uganda Revenue Authority that runs a Uganda Revenue Authority Football Club. When you look at Maroons that are under the Uganda prisons, when you look at UPDF that are run by the Uganda People's Defense Forces, when you look at NEC, that is the National Enterprise Corporation, again, it's under the army. So, you look at those kinds of teams, and because of the institutions that back them or that are at their forefront, they're more about the PR, or they are there for predominantly for PR reasons, among other things, or which could be political or otherwise. So those clubs, when it comes to this part of debate, they are cautious in bringing their heads out. In any case, they haven't brought their heads out. Some of the clubs that, although NEC was one of those that raised their hand to say, no, we do not like this, even though eventually they come around to play. Then for the other independent clubs, majority are really, really poor, or they're sort of money thirsty. Money thirsty not because their owners are poor, but money thirsty in the sense that it's an open secret that football funding in this country is still very, very low, especially when it comes at club level. We know that clubs have sort of died down or have become defunct because of the lack of financial resources. And so we know that some clubs make a little money out of debt collection and to help run clubs, And like I've said, if there are clubs that do break even, there could be a handful, if any. But majority of our clubs operate at losses. Now, for the institution-backed clubs, these are clubs that get to submit, under their respective entities, they submit a budget, annual budgets to through their respective arms to government, and then money is budgeted for and released in the different phases of whichever way the government chooses to back these teams. So their funding is entirely different. That's why I think revenue generation, while it's part of the agenda, may not be the topmost thing or the thing that really, really hurts them, and things like that. When it comes to those agencies as well, maybe I would want to think that some of their debt collection is what eventually goes into some player allowances, or if not, player, recruitment and things like that. But all that notwithstanding is that the StarTimes Uganda Premier League lacks a spine. Clubs are not self-sustainable. They're not self-sustaining, and that means you can easily buy them with money. If you promise them a few monies here and there, you can sway their stand on certain matters too. And that's why at the end of it all, you've only had one club stand out. And that's Vipers Sports Club, backed by former FUFA president, Dr. Lawrence Mulindwa, the proprietor of St. Mary's Chitende, as well as Vipers. So he's literally the last man standing on the side of football. Others have kept. Sports Club Villa, who are standing with Vipers with NEC, have shifted their stance. Not in agreement with the new league format. They said they will honor their fixtures, but they will play in protest. So, for lack of a better example, allow me to go a bit political. Uganda will go to the polls next year in January, and the opposition candidates in Uganda, or the leading opposition party, that's the National Unity Platform, have called it a protest vote. We will participate in the elections, but in a manner of protest for whatever the reasons they believe they're considering it a protest vote. So in this particular case, SCVL are saying we do not agree with the new league format. We will honor whatever fixtures you bring forth to us. We will play them, but in protest, we do not agree with what we are participating in. It's more of the case of a parent and their child. When your parent chooses for you a school and you do not like the school, but you have to go to school anyway. So you go to that school in protest. You will honor the decision to go to that school. You will actually sit in class and study. And when the exams come, you will sit and do the exams. Not because you're in the right school, but you'll have to study. That's just what it is. So basically, that's what Sports Club Villa have done. Now, on the other end, we have Vipers Sports Club, who have said, like I said, on the October 2nd, wrote their formal letter to the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, the Uganda Premier League Secretariat, and everybody that is concerned, to say we are not going to participate because we do not agree with the new league reforms and new league format. We won't be honoring those fixtures. They went on to say that they will explore all possible avenues to find remedies to this situation, even including going down the legal path. Should it necessitate that? Two, like I said, the club director, Dr. Lawrence Mulindwa, has said if it means quitting football and maybe Vipers is banned, so be it. He's okay. He's okay with he won't be okay with the decision, but he will take it and move on. Because he's in football because he loves it, football, not because he survives on football. He says football earns more from him than he earns from it. And I do agree with him, because when you look at a club of their magnitude, I would want to think, in estimation, that they are spending no less than £1 billion per season. And when I say billion shillings, that's in running the club, because it's a fully fledged club. Football players, technical department, medical department, media department, and all other people that he does employ. Also, it's the kind of team, for example, last season, he gave his players bonuses to the tune of 50 million shillings. Now, 50 million shillings is around what? Close to $15,000 for just being top of the Uganda Premier League log by at the half mark of the season. That's after 15 games played, because they were playing 30 games. And then he promised them, if you do win the Premier League title, you will get 200 million shillings. Now, 200 million shillings, that's close on to, let me see, that's close on to maybe 62 to 65,000 US dollars. Now, by the context of Ugandan football, that's a lot of money, but that's all money coming from his pocket. Meanwhile, the prize money from the Federation of Uganda Football Associations for the league winner is just close on to 20,000 pounds. 20,000 US dollars. Essentially, it's 60 million shillings. That comes to close on maybe $17,000, $18,000 thereabouts. So actually, 17,000 or 16,500 thereabout. So you can see that's still little money. Then, now, like I said, the topic is, or the question is, would StarTimes Uganda Premier League drag FUFA to court? The reason as to why I pose this question is, like I said, they are the sponsors of the league. Every single year or every single season, they invest directly, and this is in cash, at least no less than 800,000 US dollars. And that's money that goes to clubs or member clubs as stakeholders within the league. That means these clubs get around 80 million shillings plus per club for 16 clubs, for 16 clubs. Now, that 80 million shillings for each club, you leave that, and then you go to, because they have the broadcast rights, I know they've licensed the FUFA TV to showcase some of these games, but they do carry the burden of broadcasting the league. So that means you have another $200,000. That's and that's on the lower end in estimation to go and fund the actual broadcasting of these games. And these are games that have gone on increasing in terms of how many games are being shown on Ugandan TV. So when they carry all that burden, okay, it's not a burden, it's an investment for them, because they are marketing their products. That's the decoders they sell. They're in the pay TV market. Now, when they do that investment, they take to their subscribers to sell them that service or that product that they bought. And they convince their customers why they should be subscribing to their services or to their pay TV, because they have the opportunity to watch the Uganda Premier League. Now, just according, and allow me quote, according to Clive Chelsea, and he's a Ugandan sports broadcaster who works with Sunny FM, also works with NTV Uganda, and has CK Sports. I'll quote from him, and he says, as part of the contract between the clubs, or between the Uganda Premier League, the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, and themselves as the league sponsors, in one of their clauses, it says that the format cannot be changed without prior notice, that they ought to be given prior notice of at least 90 days if there is a change in format in the league. Two, that they will have a say, and they must give green light in whatever new changes. that may come in the league. Now, based on what I've read, based on what I've heard, and what I've seen is that there's no formal letter that has been issued or at least publicized to say that FUFA made official communications to StarTimes Uganda. Whether they actually did in written format and we're just not privy to that letter or we've not seen a copy of it, that's a different matter. But according to insiders, that letter did not go. So, because football, as we know it, at least in the Ugandan context, it has this number of at least four key stakeholders. It has the fans, it has the clubs, it has the sponsors, and then the Federation of Uganda Football Associations. So, if none of those was consulted, then who did FUFA consult? And also, I would like to know the single individual who is the brains behind a solution that has no problem. Also, with that very context, I would want to know, because for what they consider to be consultations with clubs, you see, was a communication. A consultation is different. So, for example, if I come here, I remember sometime doing this. I came on here and I asked you guys, when do you think is the most ideal time for us to be doing our broadcasts? And I remember Pedri being one of the people that submitted and said, we were talking about the weekend broadcast on Saturday, and it said 11 a.m. is good. So I was making a consultation. Now, when you make a consultation, it's okay to have your own opinion or position in mind. But when you make a consultation, you give people the idea that if they have reservations or an input on something, you will consider the ideas. Maybe not all of them, but you will have a takeaway from whatever they have to say. Now, FUFA communicated their changes on new league format. They did not consult the clubs. They communicated. Then when clubs went up in arms, that's then when they invite them for engagements. And the FUFA president, Engineer Moses Magogo, who in my opinion, observing from the way he does operate, is not shy of a dictator in his way of doing things. It's either his way or no other way, you know, and things like that. So they had a meeting. It was inconclusive. They decided that they will have a follow-up meeting, and that follow-up meeting did not happen. That follow-up meeting did not happen. Akim Dragon Slayer says, hello, man, what's up? Hi, Amke. Sorry, it's not Akim, it's Amke. Amke Dragon Slayer. Hi, Amke. How are you doing? So, by the time of that follow-up meeting, what they did, apparently, went and sort of forced clubs' hands behind closed doors, calling and threatening club managers and CEOs or directors that you're opposing this new league format, is being opposed to the government, and you're branded opposition. You do not want to support government programs or projects and things like that. So they threatened, in simple terms, they threatened them. Fixing car, drinking coffee can't be better. Okay, where are you joining us from, Dragon Slayer? Kindly remind me. And also, and I stand to be corrected on this one, if I'm seeing you for the first time, kindly let me know where you're joining us from, but also please consider subscribing to the Football Tribe YouTube channel. But thank you for being with us this beautiful morning. So, oh, you're a Liverpool fan. Yes, allow me to request after this broadcast, go over to the channel under the video section. We did answer a question on whether Liverpool a team in crisis. It's a discussion we'll expound on some point in this week. But for now, there's at least a video I would recommend for you to go down to the channel and watch. We get to discuss Liverpool in its entirety. But also, the other day we were discussing Liverpool entirely. Actually, last night, for those of you that were not part of us, and I know, I think LFC, you missed last night's broadcast. Good morning, LFC. It's good to have you. You say, is today the last day until you get it fixed? I can't really say. For those of you that care to know, LFC is asking about my phone problems. My phones are broken or are breaking down, and I can't say today is the last. For as long as it can still, even if half function, I'll still come on here and we engage. But as I look for more maybe semi-permanent solutions and eventually permanent solutions. It's not broken, it's breaking. Yeah, it's breaking, gradually breaking. Look at it as a wear and tear, kind of thing. When if you own a car, you know how shocks, gradually wear down, or a car tire, the way it sort of wears down, and eventually you no longer have the tread depth that you require to keep you safely on the road. So that's the kind of thing that we are dealing here with my phone. The one that looks a bit okay has lost its sensitivity to touch in some parts. So it's really, really heartbreaking for me, by the way. But we won't dwell on the negatives. So, like I was saying, so because StarTimes get to have a say in whatever changes in the format of the nature of the league, they've gone silent. And their silence, I mean, they've not really discussed this much. They do have a channel where they get to discuss Ugandan football predominantly and give fans and sort of advertise the games that are going to be played and things like that to get to market their product that they are selling to the fans. But apparently, the presenters on their TV have been told not to speak about the new league format or try to explain it. Initially, they were explaining it and things like that. And I sense that in all their silence, because while their silence is a bit conspicuous, not being complicit or being in tandem with the federation in being behind these changes, but maybe they owe it to their subscribers to say there has been changes to Ugandan football as we know it, or as we have been broadcasting it to you. And these are the expectations that you should have going forward. The new league format adds an extra 4 games. 4 games is not too much, but for clubs that budget beforehand, that's an issue if they are to go all the long way. Then the new format also eats into clubs' revenues. That's another issue. But that's not for the broadcaster to communicate. But at least I have a feeling, or at least I believe that by now the broadcaster would have maybe made a communication, at least to their customers. Not so much going into the legalese of what the implications are of these kinds of decisions from the federation, but at least on their fan sides. But I've not seen any communications to that effect. Then 2, the reason as to why I think they are being silent is they must be internally. 1, they're caught between a rock and a hard place because they're in business to make money. And this is an advertising avenue for them. And it's a huge part of their existence. Now, do they go to court to FUFA, or they believe they can sit on a round table and sort this out amicably? I know for a fact that FUFA invited them as broadcasters and they had an engagement. We saw those pictures with, I think, StarTimes being led by their Ugandan vice president. That's the seasoned football commentator and a KCCA fan, Audrey Nsonga Senior. For those of you that are regulars to this channel, I'm sure you've seen him before on the channel before when we were talking about the new league format and the Premier League subsequently. So ever since that meeting, they've gone quiet. They're not saying anything. But like I've told you, they have those clauses that protect their investment in terms of having a say on how the league is run or the kind of format that gets to be played. And I'm thinking to myself, are they pondering going to court with this? On the other side, Viper said they could explore legal avenues. And given the manner in which these reforms were introduced, I think they would have some good arguments to make before court if they were to go to court. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I won't speak in legal terms, but I'll give you an example. Every season, prior to every start of the season, clubs are licensed. They go through a certain process that certifies them to play in the new season. That's looking at their home ground, whether it's fit to host games, players' contracts and registrations and things like that. They sign rules that they adhere to going into a new season and things like that. Now, that process started around the 20th of June and concluded sometime in mid-August or late July or early August, somewhere around there. So clubs went through that process, got licensed, under the expectation that they will be playing a round-robin kind of league as they've come to know it. Because, like I said, there was no reason or justification to reinvent the wheel. So they get licensed, and then fast forward, I think around 20th August or slightly before that, that's when FUFA released a circular on the new league format. Now, you've already licensed a club to play a round robin. At least that's what they believe, because there's not been prior discussion with them as a stakeholder to say some things are changing in football as you know it going into next season. So that would be the easy presumance or presumption. And then they get licensed, and then you say, now, you see, yes, you qualify to play in this league, but you're not going to play football as you know it. Then these double headers that you get to take to a venue like Nambole. Again, I've used the example. It is similar to that of the Spanish La Liga taking the game between Villarreal and Barcelona over to the US. The reason as to why I say similar is because some of the clubs that we do have that participate in the Ugandan Football League are clubs that come from certain regions. For example, we have a club called Chitara Football Club that comes from within the Bunyoro sub-region. And I think they play in Buhinga, something. So when you take their home game or supposed home game from Bunyoro and bring it to Kampala so that the game can be played at Nambole, you're disadvantaging the home fans. You're disadvantaging them as a club in terms of the revenues they would have gotten from that game, and because of the local appeal that the team has within the community. I understand you wanting to sell the bigger game to the rest of the Ugandans, but in the process, you're disadvantaging somebody. Two, like I said, they lose their revenue, and if you're going to keep carrying their team away gradually, the locals who cannot afford constantly coming to the capital in terms of transport, given the logistical difficulties that lies in between, and then buy match day ticket and attend the match, eventually they go apart from the team, and in that kind of sense. So, and then the other thing is, what does that mean to the broadcaster who is supposed to broadcast these games? That's why I say that their silence is in a way conspicuous, but also are they exploring their options? And I suspect that is the case, that they are exploring their options to see whether there is something they can do about this. If there's nothing they can do about it, maybe so be it. But I do suspect that there is something that they can do about it. Then, can't the sponsor also negate on their responsibility of showcasing the league to say, no, this is a product we bought to showcase, and then you're giving us something else, so we cannot continue with that. In other words, if you go to a shop and ask for a high-sense TV, and then on pulling out of the box to do a test, it's a different brand, maybe Black Arc or TLC, you can raise your eyebrows and say, no, I paid for a high-sense. Why am I getting a TLC? You know, so in that sort of context. But it's all a big question. Will StarTimes go to court? Will Vipers run to court to have these matters arbitrated over? We know that you have to go back in 2009 when Pauline acquired a then club called Narubare Football Club, and then the federation at the time, still FUFA, refused them to play in the league, and yet the club they had acquired were in the Uganda Premier League or the FUFA Super League. At the time, it was, I think, Super League. I would relate it to, for example, you see how the Saudis bought Newcastle? Just imagine after the Saudis bought Newcastle, then the Premier League or the FA told them Newcastle cannot play in the Premier League just because it was under new ownership. Does that make sense to you? Of course, it did make sense then. There was no reason whatsoever to justify that. So Proline went to court and they won that case, and that's how they were reinstated. Then, on another time, I think it was Proline being knocked out of the Uganda Cup. Then another time, it was Proline around 2017 or thereabout. It was during an international break like it is now. They had some of their players, as at least 3, and the rules of the Uganda Premier League say that when you have 3 or more players summoned to the national team, then you are allowed to have your game postponed to have that game not played for when it was scheduled to be. So that I think about 3 players. I think Bright Ankan at the time was among them. That was summoned to the national team. And guess what? FUFA was telling them you must honor your fixture with Sports Club Villa, and if you forfeit it, then you will lose the points. You'll lose the game by forfeiture, and then you could be penalized by being deducted points. So, like I said, all these things, we have a system in place. We know what the rules say, and yet somebody, because of their high-handedness, they choose that we will ignore all those rules, the rules that they have been part of setting up, and then decide to play to the contrary and say we will have a game played. And you look at them and say, what kind of nonsense is that? Like I said, our game is run by selfish people. They're more money-minded than football-minded. That's my impression of them. And yeah, it doesn't leave a good taste. So we've seen so many times rules being broken. For example, Vipers at one point had to play, I think, a preliminary round in the CAF Champions League, but the federation had no shame whatsoever, who, if they want them to succeed, would have said, we will excuse summoning some of their players or their players to the national team, given the kind of engagement they do have on the continent, the kind of responsibility. Because when you go to play on the continent, you're not just representing your brand as a club, you're representing the entirety of the flag. You're representing the entirety of Ugandan football when you go out there. But the federation decided otherwise, and yeah, that's them. And I've said this before, without any fear for contradiction whatsoever, the way Engineer Moses Magogo and his compatriots run the game, but particularly him, because it's either his way or nobody else's way. It's his way that goes. Is dictatorial in nature. And yet, he's the same person that goes on TV, that's FUFA TV and radio, every Thursday, I think, of the week, to teach about football. Under the topic, let's understand football. It's a coined phrase in Uganda, which I translate, that says, tutegero mpira, which translates, let's understand football. Well, I do not want to question his understanding of football, but I will question his motives for Ugandan football. They do appear to be selfish at every turn, at every glance. Anyways, do let me know what your thoughts are on all those things. Ugandan football, international football. We talked about La Liga and Barcelona, Villarreal being taken to the US. I've given you my views. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. Have yourselves a blessed day, because I have to run for another engagement. But like I said, when I do, I will try to, for as long as my phone can still function, I'll try to put out some content in the course of this week, so that we discuss certain matters. Otherwise, have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, and stay blessed for now.